S&P 500 over the long term. An example of an index tracking ETF is BMO's S&P 500 Index ETF. It's the largest ETF in Canada that tracks this well-recognized and popular index. It provides exposure to the returns of the market cap weighted S&P 500 index at a low cost with a management fee of just 0.08%. This broad market ETF makes for an efficient building block in a portfolio, saving you time and effort while mitigating single stock risk. If you're looking for exposure to the largest and most liquid public companies in the United States, this ETF delivers an easy-to-use solution and instant
intended to be or construed as investment advice. Please consult a professional advisor before putting a loonie in any of these financial markets.
The dirty secret is that no one's ever going to get paid back.
People have the shortest memories when it comes to investment.
We just got to get Keith into Bitcoin.
Hey, there's a bubble. Welcome back to Loonie Hour, episode 129. As always, joined by the three amigos, Boomer, Keith Dicker, IceCap Asset Management, Rich Diaz, PGM Global. What's going on, Boomer?
It's not a lot. Waiting for spring to come. I got nothing. I got a blank haircut here today. I got them all cut. Yes, that literally happened a couple hours ago.
Looking
Normally
fast.
when you get a haircut, you need a day or two for it to feel a bit more confident. Otherwise, you have like Steve Saretsky here. You know, it's nice tight.
Not much there, buddy.
Ouch.
I know, but the goal is to have Rich Diaz here because Rich just rocks it. What do you got there, Rich? What are you working on?
Oh man, I'm just nothing going on. Honestly, it's like the quietest week in a bit. Went out for dinner with a friend of mine from London. Went to a nice restaurant. Otherwise, just chilling.
Hey, you're wearing a crude oil shirt.
I am. I'm wearing my favorite shirt of all time.
Is that available on our store?
It is available on our store, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, we haven't.
What else? What else is available on our store?
Got a mug. Yeah, I think that's about all we got. We got about a mug and a couple t-shirts. So if you want any Loonie Hour swag, we haven't really promoted it. It's just been sitting there idle. But LoonieHour.ca does have some swag. There. You look at the prices, guys. I can tell you, I will promise you, we are not making a single penny off of any of this. So before you complain
it's a bit
about
of a
the
joke,
prices,
but the shirts are sweet. One of them says crude oil is super useful. Yeah, support us. But like I said, we priced it to perfection, I think.
Speaking of crude oil, did you see that that MP? There was a video that went viral on Twitter this week where she was complaining about Canadian oil and gas. That basically the guy that she was arguing with, the guy had like a "I love Canadian oil" sticker on his laptop, and she like chewed him out, basically saying he was biased and that he was a bad person for.
Well, I think what happened, maybe I'm wrong, because we all read a lot of stuff, but I thought it was the Premier of Saskatchewan. He was invited to be a guest by the Conservatives for one of the committees, and the Liberals and NDPs, for whatever reason, they weren't aware that is it Mo's? Is that the?
It wasn't Mo.
name?
It wasn't. No.
It's different.
Oh, maybe that's something else then. Okay. Anyway, but they were blindsided with the laptop sticker that says "Oil is." I love oil or whatever it was, but Rich, is oil used in almost everything we use and consume?
It just tells you these people are not serious about. They're just not serious people. There's like so many problems to be dealing with, and instead of dealing with that, they're getting rankled by a stupid sticker or a T-shirt or any kind of nonsense like that.
That lady, she had a laptop running. She had glasses on, I believe. Her clothing, like everything runs through oil at some point.
Of course,
Rich, that T-shirt's gonna get you banned.
No, it's a cool T-shirt. On the back, it has a list of all the things that are made with crude oil, and that list is quite extensive, I would say. And plus, it's cool. It's got a smiley face.
Turn around now.
No, this one's faded. This one's faded. I've had it too long, but the other one, I promise you, is crisp. And yeah, it's a new supplier, so it'll look good.
There you go. Well, just on the show today, we have a very important guest. Well, I guess it's his second time coming on the show. We'll have him on here shortly. Ben Rabidoux, North Cove Advisors, runs a research service. and he is covering. He's been all over the immigration numbers. He's been in finance meetings with the Krista Freeland, et cetera, banging on the door, talking about immigration, saying you guys got to get this number down. You got to get this number down. And so now with the immigration minister finally pivoting and making in a rather large policy change, Ben's been kind of crunching the numbers, is going to walk us through the dramatic changes that he thinks are coming to population growth, GDP, Bank of Canada forecasts. So I think it's going to be a very, very enlightening conversation. I think, like I said, he's been all over this from day one, right alongside the Loonie Hour. I'll give him credit. He might have even been ahead of the Loonie Hour.
I don't know.
It was close.
I don't know.
He's been really on the ball here. So we're gonna have him on here.
There's a photo finish coming up.
Well, before we bring Ben on, there was a couple things we wanted to touch on. There's a couple things on the housing front. So last week we had OSFI, the banking regulator, saying they're going to limit loans that are greater than 450% loan to income. So
what does that mean?
Just more tightening around the edges. The share of new mortgages that are greater than 450% loan to income is around 12% of the float today. During the pandemic, though, right, when rates were super low and everyone was like boring their brains out, it got as high as I think 26%. So OSFI saying they're going to still allow those mortgages, but they're going to allocate a quota for each bank. They're going to say, okay, you can, based on your portfolio of loans, you're allowed to have this many for this quarter, and you cannot exceed. So basically, the banks, in terms of it's just going to reduce the number of high leverage loans that are being given out. So I just look at it and say it's a little bit more credit tightening, which will be more impactful when rates actually come down, because with the stress test today, it's almost impossible to actually exceed the 450% loan to income.
I have two questions. One, what percentage of the market is like negative? There's like 5 million, I think, mortgages outstanding, according to the Canadian Bankers Association. What percentage of them are negative equity, you reckon? Is it a really small?
I don't know if anyone has any data on that, because it's like, how do you mark to market? How do you mark to market a house?
Oh, okay. I remember when the U.S. was going through their thing in 2008, 9, 10, or whatever. That was like the big talk, negative equity, and there was all these charts on it. And I guess you're right. I guess how do you model that for each individual house and then aggregate them? I was just curious.
Yeah.
Well, that's where your modeling will never produce a negative number, because if it does, then you have to start taking charge, provisioning for it. And
the provisions are rising as a percentage of total loans, and earnings are continuing to contract.
But they're still quite low though,
Yeah.
Rich. So it's as a percentage of total loans on an aggregate basis, it's no higher than the highest peak, from the last 15 years. That was with no recession.
One last thing on the Rich, you'll love this, from OSFI. So the Competition Bureau was highly suggesting and recommending that OSFI remove the stress test on mortgage renewals. So for people that are like, hey, I'm at RBC and like I'm renewing and RBC is not giving me a competitive mortgage rate, I would like to move my mortgage to TD and get a better rate because TD can offer me this. The Competition Bureau has been recommending for a number of years, and all mortgage brokers, that they should remove the stress test, because those mortgages were stress tested 4 or 5 years ago, and you're locked in at your bank, right? Your bank knows that you're stuck, so they don't have to necessarily give you a competitive rate. But OSFI actually turned that down this week, so they came out and says, nope, it's when it shifts from one bank to a new bank, that becomes that new bank's responsibility. They should stress test that loan. And so that policy is not going away. So if you've got a mortgage renewal coming up in the next, year or whatever, you might be stuck with your bank. So hopefully they give you a decent rate.
But the banks are a bunch of decent lads. They're going to do it right on you, Steve. No.
No
comment.
I did just renew a mortgage, and it was it's like pulling teeth with those guys.
So why don't you share how how that went. Like,
Yeah.
well, is it a fun conversation or is it not fun or simple?
Okay, I'll give you an
details?
example.
Yeah, how's it work?
Yeah, for sure. So I was originally basically, I mean, I think everybody on the show probably knows I had a variable rate mortgage on my primary res, foolish me. And I was like, based on our discussion last week, I was like, you know what? I think I'll take a bit of peace of mind, some security. Let's fix this mortgage. Let's roll it into a 3-year fixed. So I went to the bank and the bank says, yeah, we can give you a 3-year fixed at 5.3. I'm like, well, man. I mean, I know where the market's at, and I'm like, market should be closer to like 4.99. And so went up the chain of command. They came back and said, okay, not 5.3, we'll give you 5.2. And I'm like, man, that's still not great. I got a lot of accounts with you guys. Like, this is not a one-off mortgage. And then I had to go up another chain of command, write a couple letters, pull a couple strings, make a few phone calls.
Oh, I like
and
this.
I ended up getting them down to 4.89, which I was quite pleased with. But that was a week-long process, and a lot of favors called in.
So I have a quick question. Did they stress test you for that?
No, because it's just this is probably like a longer conversation, but basically here's what I'll say is when people ask about all these negative amortizations and, oh, your amortization now is 50 years because you've been paying interest only. Oh my gosh, this is a catastrophe. So what happens here, right, is in my circumstance, my variable effectively became an interest only loan. So it was a 5-year variable and with 3 years left on it.
But with a fixed payment.
Yeah, fixed payment variable.
Okay.
And so the bank literally just goes, oh, no problem. Yep, we will just basically convert your mortgage to a 3-year fixed and re-extend it to place it back to a 30-year amortization and just just basically hits reset. Done. Problem solved. Gone away.
So your mortgage, though, like from the beginning when you bought your house to the end, will have had a longer amortization period than, let's say, the 25 years.
I mean, yeah, originally, but now it's back to what it was. They just basically said, well, during the first 2 years you owned this property, you really didn't pay off barely any principal.
Got it.
But they just simply convert it from variable to a fixed product, and the problem goes away. So like, I know like everyone's making a huge deal about, oh my God, negative am below is amortization. This problem can actually be relatively easily fixed. Because the banks basically just push a button and say, okay, no problem. We convert you to a fixed rate. This is now off our books. It's a little bit, I mean, yeah, we don't have time to get into it today, but
yeah, I wanted to, but I bit my tongue.
I just have one comment. It's probably on Rich's tongue there is as well. Like our whole economy over the last, decade has been all based upon the belief that policymakers can just press a button to fix things. You know what I mean? It's just extended a little bit. Yeah, I'm sure on an aggregate basis, somebody gets tripped up with this, and we go on. But it is interesting, though. Thanks for sharing how that went back and forth. So I'm sure right now, on Friday, because you're listening to this on Friday right now, hundreds of Loonie Hour followers are now calling their bank trying to get that down another 30 basis
points.
Well,
as soon as I lock in my mortgage there, that bond yields are going to crater and there's going to be a dozen rate cuts. So, but without further ado, we've got Ben Rabidoux here. We want to bring him into the show. Let's do that right now.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Good to see you all.
Yeah, so we'll frame it up for you here this week. But correct me if I'm wrong. You did what is it, like a conference or like a meeting with Krista Freeland on a housing panel? What was that? 18 months ago?
Gosh,
2 years ago?
no, that's going at least 2 years ago. Yeah, no, I did some consulting work as they were sort of preparing for kind of their housing policies ahead of one of the budgets.
Are you with GC Strategies too?
I wish, man. I wouldn't be talking. I'd be sitting on an island somewhere if I could get some lucrative contract with the government. I wouldn't be talking to you clowns.
Yeah, that's
I think we should be paying GC Strategies as well, right? Because we've been milking this joke for a while now.
Keith, we pay taxes. We are paying for them.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
So Ben, you did this, a couple years ago. You chatted with that. What was it? What was kind of the message, or your message, anyways, and the takeaway?
Oh, actually, you know what? It was exactly related to the non-permanent resident cohort. This is a perfect segue, Steve. I don't know if you teed this up, but this is exactly what we need to talk about because so I testified before the Standing Committee on Finance. This is going back 2022 or 2021. And I actually highlighted the need to tighten up on non-permanent residents because of the kind of distorting impact they're having on the rental market. I spoke to Parliament there, and it was funny because looking back, the numbers are almost quaint. It was like I was kind of banging the drum over 200,000 annual increase, and today we're at 800,000, right? But then kind of out of that, I ended up speaking with kind of doing a little bit of consulting as well on the housing policies for the government. And it was the same thing. It's just like, listen, like nothing really matters on the supply side. We're never going to be able to build enough if you're going to grow the population by 1.2 million. So you got to be more thoughtful on this. And that was my message. And of course, it didn't resonate then, but it seems to be resonating today.
Yeah, no, it's amazing what the polling numbers will do. But that was that was a couple of years ago, and here we are today with a couple announcements in the last month from Immigration Minister Mark Miller. So maybe for the listeners that are less familiar, they're not following, immigration, how it works. We've got this permanent resident target of close to 500,000 people. But do you want to just kind of give us the high level, quick snapshot on how this works and where the big flaws have been?
Sure. So let me tee it up. I'll kind of sketch the kind of lay of the land, and then I'll also give my view as to why it was always set to slow dramatically. Okay, so take a step back. You're right. The feds have a roughly 500,000 target or cap on permanent residents every year. But somehow we've seen population growth swell by almost 1.3 million in the past year, based on the latest numbers. So you go, well, how did you get from 500,000 cap to 1.3 million? And the answer is, as you alluded to, this non-permanent resident cohort. And non-permanent residents are made up of overwhelmingly work permit holders, international students, and then asylum seekers. And the asylum seekers get a lot of press, but they're actually a relatively small portion of that group. And by asylum seekers, we're talking about refugees and et cetera. And so basically coming out of the pandemic, we had a very tight labor market. We had a lot of job vacancies that needed to be met. And so we saw temporary worker growth explode to the point where in the last couple of quarters, we were seeing that cohort growing by 190,000 quarterly. So just that one cohort was adding basically 2 percentage points annually to population growth, which is an insane number. And that's just temporary workers. Then you have international students we're blowing out as well on top of that, which is a whole separate dynamic that's kind of related to universities and colleges wanting to fund themselves by charging 4 to 5 times the tuition for these non-permanent residents. Bottom line, what you have to understand is this was always set to be unsustainable, and it was always set up that population growth would be much slower on the other side of this boom for a couple of reasons, right? And the first is that it's highly pro-cyclical, which means that as the economy expands and gets tight and the labor market tightens, that in turn drives this big boom in temporary workers. But as rates rose, and as we're starting to feel the impact of those high rates on the economy, we're starting to see that there's much less need for any incremental growth in that cohort. So for example, you can look at private sector payrolls are now declining on a 6-month basis. We can see job vacancies are plunging. You can see from the latest survey data. I know Rich is a big fan of the CFIB data. That came out this morning. The shortage of labor, the share of respondents saying they have a shortage of labor keeps plunging. So we're seeing all of these things that suggest that like we just don't need that run rate of 190,000 quarterly going forward. It's just not going to happen. As the economy cools, population growth will slow naturally. So that's one thing. The second thing is just that you need to just look at the politics around this. And this current government, as Keith would say, is getting mullered in the polls over this exact issue. I mean, they're dying over this whole housing, cost of living, social fabric, like the whole healthcare system being overrun. All of this is tied up with this insane policy of allowing population to grow by 1.3 million in a year. They're getting killed in the polls over this. So it's amazing how when politicians are facing the prospects of losing the next election, they suddenly grow a spine and figure out how to do things right. And so that's the other thing, is because the politics have changed, you kind of know that there's going to be a response out of Ottawa. And the rhetoric from the finance minister was all like, look, the integrity of the system is at risk. And so that you kind of knew something was coming. Okay, that's the second thing. And then finally, the last point I would make, and then we'll get into the most recent announcement. I'm just setting the table. The last point, and the one that everyone misses, is when temporary workers and international students come here to Canada, they then are fast-tracked for permanent residency through a number of programs. Okay, and so when you expand the non-permanent resident cohort, it means that in the future, a higher share of those permanent resident slots will be allocated to people who are already in the country. So remember, the feds have a hard cap of, call it 500,000 permanent residents. There's one of two things they can do. They can either bring fresh new bodies into the country to fill that quota, or they can allocate permanent residency to people who are already here on a temporary basis. Now, if they do the latter, the impact is that we're effectively just reclassifying people who are already living in the country. And so when you have this big run up in non-permanent residents, it always leads to a slowdown in population growth down the road for exactly this reason. So that was always my call. This is not, Steve, you've been reading my work for years. You know, I was saying this boom, it's going to die under its own weight. It's not sustainable. It's not a new normal. And then just to kind of close that loop, then we had the immigration minister come out and say, well, actually what we'd like to do is we're going to reduce the share of non-permanent residents down to 5% of the Canadian population within 3 years. And just for context, we've never seen a boom in non-permanent residents like we've seen right now. The closest parallel is actually the late 1980s, which was also a period where we saw a massive housing boom, a lot of housing speculation, a run up in interest rates, and then on the other side of that, a nasty recession that led to that cohort of non-permanent residents being cut in half over a 5-year period. But what's most important is back then, that cohort peaked at about 1.6% of the total Canadian population. So it was a much smaller number. Today, it's 6.5%. So just a huge number. Now, what this means, and what I said on Twitter, I'm sorry, guys, I'm going a long time. I'm sorry, Keith. I know you want to go, but let me just close this circle and then I'll turn it back over. So what this means is in order to get the population of non-permanent residents back down to that 5% threshold over a 3-year period, if we assume that we're going to continue to see permanent residents grow at the current run rate that we've seen over the last few years, then the non-permanent resident cohort has to fall by 600,000 over a 3-year period. What that's going to do to headline growth, just imagine what this means. It means that right now, today, we are adding 800,000 on a year-over-year basis. Within a year, it's going to be subtracting 200,000. Right off the bat, you've got a 1 million swing in non-permanent residents in terms of what they're adding to the population growth. So if you roll this forward, within a year and a half, population growth is going to go from being 3.2% currently to 0.6%. And it's going to flatline at that level out to 2027. Now, all of this is contingent on the feds actually doing what they say they're going to do. But I don't really have any reason to doubt them, because the alternative is that they die in the polls in the next election. I think they're well aware of that. So I'm going to stop there. I'll turn that back over to you guys.
So just to reiterate and confirm, so you're saying basically population, which has been growing, let's call it 1.3 million, but within the next 12 months, you see that number falling down to about 300,000?
Yeah, more like 250. Yep.
Okay. So, I mean, there is still some growth there, but clearly not what we're used to.
Yeah, exactly. And where I think it's going to matter is you're going to actually see that cohort of non-permanent residents shrink. Now, they are overwhelmingly renters. International students, temporary workers, they're all renters. And that's why we've seen the rental market blow out the way that it has. And I know Rich tracks this regularly. Right? It's adding 0.5 percentage points to headline CPI just from rents alone. This is a crazy tight market. that's going to cool considerably. And this time next year, you'll see rents have started to normalize. They'll likely be back in that kind of, I don't know, 2, 3, 4% annual range. It'll take a lot of steam out of headline inflation.
So anyone locking in their variable rate mortgage to a 3-year fix now might have made a bad move.
Yeah,
We're gonna
maybe.
get into that.
Ben wasn't exposed to that conversation.
No, he
earlier.
wasn't.
Ben knows. I called Ben the other day.
Why did you
Yeah,
call
that's
him?
right. We had a long discussion about that, didn't we, Steve?
We had a
I called Ben as well. Rich didn't though. He's the only one.
Yeah,
Rich,
no.
where's the
Ben
love?
and I
Come
had a
on.
discussion around rates. So Ben, how does that kind of morph into your outlook on housing, the economy? Obviously, we had GDP figures out today, kind of bumped a little bit higher than expected. Economy, I guess, officially is not yet in a recession, even though on a per capita basis, we've been contracting for what, 5-6 quarters now. So kind of curious how you overlay this, right? You go from 1.2, 1.3 million people down to about 250. If that is the case and the feds follow through with this, what is the impact here? Is this, and again, I'm kind of curious if, in your opinion, if these policymakers are actually aware of the potential ramifications.
Well, I think even prior to this announcement, I was very much in the hard landing recession view. And I do think we're already seeing signs of that. The GDP print this morning kind of notwithstanding, but you, like I said, you look at private sector payrolls, they're rolling over. Per capita GDP looks really soft. All the consumption data, all that kind of discretionary spending data suggests that consumers are starting to hurt. There was a wild data point that was out just this morning, guys, around insolvencies. And Steve will know that my call for the last year and a half has been that business insolvencies would actually lead consumer insolvencies this cycle for a number of reasons that we can discuss. But bottom line is, so the February insolvency data just came out. We had business insolvencies across the country up 122% year over year. But here's the crazy stat. If instead of looking at the number of insolvencies, you look at the liabilities, the dollar liabilities in those insolvency filings, they were up 4,300% year over year. So we're seeing big businesses starting to go under.
Is that the takeaway? Is that what that means? It just
bigger businesses are filing. If the number of filings is up 122%, but the dollar volume of liabilities is up 4,000%, it means we're seeing bigger and bigger businesses starting to file. And this has been a consistent thing.
I got to jump in, of course. Who's the creditor on the other side? Are these businesses big enough to issue their own credit, or are they borrowing through the banking system?
Well, we don't get very granular data on that from the insolvency numbers, but I would say overwhelmingly I would expect bank lending in various intermediaries. It wouldn't be public sector or public market type borrowing. But what's interesting on that, so I just want to run with this thread because I think what's most concerning to me right now is what we're seeing in terms of like the business sector in Canada broadly, is that you're seeing a number of very concerning signs. So if you look at credit liabilities of private sector, non-financial businesses, so in other words, all forms of borrowing, declining now over the past 3 months on a seasonally adjusted basis. First time we've seen that since the COVID lockdowns, right? And then prior to that, the financial crisis. So it's a signal that either businesses are too scared to borrow or that lenders are too scared to lend. It's not a good read through for the economy. And so you're starting to see like a lot of stuff there in the business side is it's clear that businesses are hurting. It's only starting to show up in the employment numbers. And I think part of that is still due to the fact that it was so hard to attract workers for so long that businesses, I think, are still leery of letting go of the workers that they have for now. But I think that as you roll this forward, we continue to see businesses folding in Canada. It's going to show up in the labor market. And so my call still remains, Steve, to just close that circle. I do think we're heading for recession. I think come the summer, the discussion is going to very quickly shift towards rate cuts. And I think by the end of the summer, I think there's a good chance we'll be discussing whether 25 basis point cuts at a time will be enough. That's where I think we're going. I think we're heading for a very hard landing. And that's why my view was that we would see considerably more cuts than the 75 basis points that were kind of priced in. And then this population dynamic is just going to add to that. It's going to weigh on population or on economic growth that much more.
So before we get into cuts, I just want to jump in there because I think the whole recession, no recession to me is sort of academic, because if it wasn't for the 3.2% population growth, we would have already been in recession. So that's the sort of the other end of that, the other side of the coin, which is population growth can be good because it sustains nominal and real GDP, even if they're getting less productive. But what we see, so to me, I think that that's why the recession talk and non-recession talk to me is sort of academic, right? We know GDP per capita is shrinking 5-6 quarters in a row, and if it wasn't for this massive influx, we would have already been contracting on a non per capita basis, on a regular real GDP basis. As far as like the cuts, we'll get into that in a second. But I mean, do you feel that the one maybe problem I have with your analysis is that I think a lot of the time these things take longer to play out, right? Like it's, and I've made this mistake before, and I'm sure I'll make it again, which is you run a spreadsheet and you have the month-on-month numbers, and you have the quarter-on-quarter numbers, and what where the inflection points you think are going to happen right away, they often take 6 months. Have you allowed for that in your sort of analysis, where you said next year we're going to get to 0.6, and I would just posit that might take 2 years for this to work itself out, or am I too conservative in that sort of estimate?
Oh, I get that. I completely get that. I've gotten lots of calls wrong because they take longer to play out. 100% that. I completely appreciate that perspective. I'm just going on what the government has said. Now, so again, take that for what it's worth. But if you assume that they're going to deliver as they've implied, then that's where we're going. And you're right, Rich. I've assumed that we're going to get to that 5% threshold in non-permanent residents in a linear kind of fashion. And it may be that it ends up being lumpy and sort of back-weighted. All that means is you get a much steeper slowdown in population growth in the future.
Okay, fair enough.
But what I would say actually is, if you look at the quarter-over-quarter numbers for non-permanent residents, we had a dramatic slowdown. It went from plus 350,000 last quarter to plus 150,000 this quarter. So I think you're already starting to see it show up in the data. You're seeing the deceleration in non-permanent resident growth.
Yeah, because you can't grow it exponentially. That's what you're saying. There's a second derivative element to it that's important.
Right. And the point I've always made is the non-permanent resident cohort is so volatile, quarter to quarter, so volatile. And because it's such a rotating door, right? You've got people that come here for 2 years on a college student permit or whatever. And so you've got a ton of outflows. The moment that you crimp the inflows, but the outflows continue, that headline number changes very quickly. And people are always surprised at that. So I don't have a problem getting to population growth being, cut down to that kind of 0.7, 0.6% range within a year. I think it's entirely plausible. But you're right. If it takes longer, then it just means that the slowdown is that much steeper. And again, all this contingent upon this government actually doing what they're saying, which is a big, big if.
I love this conversation. I just I need some more information for me to better sort of piece all this together. How, and I don't follow it well enough to understand the answer. Of the number of non-permanent residents, Ben, what number or percentage of it are university students or college students?
I'm just going to pull it up.
Is it the majority, or is it a small?
No, the majority are work permit holders. So so I'm looking at it right here. So you've got 2.6 million overall. Of that, about 700,000 are study permits, and then another 300,000 have both study and work permits. So call it just under 1 million of that 2.6. Contrast that with work permit holders, which are 1.2 million, and then that other 300,000 that have both the work plus study. So it's the second biggest group behind temporary workers.
And for the government to have efficient execution of their plan, we need the laugh track for this one, right, Rich? Yeah. Sorry. That's not, Rich just barely contained himself in that one. But on a serious note, for the government to execute on this, are they targeting students, or the combination of both, or the third group?
Well, the big one is, so they've already announced that they're going to be cutting the student visas by roughly a third nationally. But then more importantly, that they're going to be,
that
that was already
though?
announced.
Yeah.
So it's like a 2-year, I believe it's like a 2-year cap while they sort of reevaluate, but realistically, based on the politics of the day, yeah, it's probably going to turn into something more permanent.
Because I'm starting to see now, for example, this is anecdotal, right? Now I've seen universities already announce that they're going to have budget shortfalls coming up because of this. So, like for example, one of the larger ones down here, I think they announced they have a $2 to $3 million operating budget gap because of it.
Yep.
So I imagine if that takes place across the country, there's going to be it's another challenge is going to be created with government, even though they're saving maybe on one side, all of a sudden now a lot of very big universities are going to be going to the provincial sectors or federal. I don't know how they're going to do. Say, hey, we need more money for this stuff here.
Yeah.
Like it's a big, you put
well, here's what they've done in
one
Ontario.
hole and another one comes up.
Yeah, so because this is allocated at the provincial level, it's the feds set the kind of the high level cap, and then the provinces figure out how they're going to allocate those permits within their own province. What Ontario has said, and this just came out yesterday, is they basically said of the permits that we've been effectively issued by the feds, 96% of those, effectively all of them, are going to go to public colleges, public universities. And what they're going to really clamp down on are these career colleges, these private-public partnerships with the colleges. And that's the stuff that rightfully should be, like where you've got like a college sitting above a burger joint in some strip mall, like that's the crap that they got to get rid of. And so it may end up being that they tighten those areas up while leaving the permits in place for colleges and universities.
Sorry to interrupt the show. Just wanted to let you guys know, if you're interested in Ben's research service, he runs Edge Analytics, which is for real estate professionals, realtors, mortgage brokers, developers, etc. It's a great service. It's something I personally subscribe to. If you're on the institutional level and you want even more in-depth research, Ben has a higher level tier called North Cove Advisors. Again, there'll be links to all of that in the show notes. Just wanted to drop that information. Back to the show.
You can just picture now a whole army of Burger King, McDonald workers, transcending on, descending upon Ben's house and any day now.
There were some protests.
You know
Ben,
what?
there were some protests happening, was there not?
Yeah, I want to actually, so this is related to this discussion. This is something I'm thinking through. So picture this for a moment. We have 2.6 million non-permanent residents in the country. A lot of them have come here under false pretenses. So because of this whole public-private partnership, and I don't know how much you guys have gone down this rabbit hole. Basically, all of us could today open up a college here in Ontario. We can, or wherever in the country. It can
Loonie Hour
totally,
Loonie Hour you.
Well, people might actually learn something.
Yeah, no, seriously. And it can either be just a totally private college, or if we're lucky, we can partner with a public institution that would give us the kind of grant their degree granting capabilities. And then we become sort of an affiliate of theirs, but we hire the recruiters to go overseas, primarily to India. That's been the main target market. And we make all these promises to these kids over there. Hey, if you come to Canada, you'll get fast track for permanent residency. Once you have permanent residency, you can bring your whole family over through the reunification visas. And so consequently, you've had these kids who their families have mortgaged the farm, pooled their savings, sent their kids here under these false pretenses. Now we have 2.6 million non-permanent residents in the country. They're not all going to get permanent residency. If they do, it means that we are going to hit our PR target for the next 5 years without increasing the population of one person. Think about that. So what this means is we've allowed promises to be made that we cannot honor. And consequently, you're going to have 2.6 million non-permanent residents in the country, overwhelmingly skewed towards men. Okay, it's about 2/3. And a lot of them are going to be pissed off because they're not going to get the PR they were promised. I actually think it has the potential to be a national security issue. Like, think about it. You get like 1 million young men in this country are going to be pissed off at our government because they were promised something that we were never prepared to deliver.
I mean, it's an ethical nightmare. And I think one of the real, I mean, I feel really sorry for those people. I think it's quite annoying because a lot of people like yourself, identified and raised the flag and were ignored for all various different reasons. But I think also it affects sort of what we're going to talk a bit later about. It's just wages also. I mean, that's like the other, we don't talk about enough of it. Part of the thing that I want to talk about later is productivity. And one of the reasons we have poor productivity in this country is because we have this infinite supply of cheap labor.
Yes.
And I think, and people say, how does that make sense? Well, when labor is more expensive, there's businesses in general basically are forced to do more capital investment. And capital investment is, can be more productive. Anyway, that's a conversation perhaps for another day, a little later. But I think that's the other thing about these kids. They not only are they not going to get the PR, the jobs they're going to be working are low skill jobs that cannot afford sort of either take care of themselves hardly, and certainly not to bring over family. And I think that's just really, really sad. There's a real human element to this.
Yeah, it's a real pickle. And I want to be clear, like, the folks that are here as non-permanent residents are not, they're not the problem in the sense that it's not like they're not at fault, right? They were sold false promises. They've come here, they've been taken advantage of, especially international students. You had kids living under bridges. They've been turned into these cash cows. You had Mark Miller kind of accidentally slipped. That's the immigration minister. Remember in the one comments, he accidentally slipped up and called them lucrative assets.
Yeah.
Which is like,
these big businesses totally want cheap labor. Yeah.
100%. And so you're right. And all of that, I think, is tied up. I think so many of the problems that we've seen in Canada, I hate to oversimplify, but I really think that a lot of the problems we've seen in Canada over the last couple of years can be traced back to this very irresponsible expansion of the population that we just could never really manage.
Ben, so yeah, walk me through the ramifications here. If you're not our listener here that's not an immigrant, maybe they're born, raised in Canada, and they're saying, okay, this is all happening around immigration. How does this actually impact me? What are the real economic impacts here of these changes that are coming down the pipe?
Well, on the housing front, it will slow rental growth, I think, quite significantly. I think it'll also loosen up some of the resale supply. I have a view that when you have rents this strong, it sort of engenders speculation, including in the single family market. So Steve, you'll know this. If you buy a single family home, you can never cash flow it by putting one family in it. But if you're willing to put 10 or 15 college kids in there and charge them $500 a bed, all of a sudden you get real cash flow off of that. And you have seen that. That has been an absolute dynamic. Secondly, and I wrote about this, Steve, in a recent note that you would have seen, is that one of the things that we've noticed is ever since the housing market cooled in mid-2022, new listings have been very weak in all the big metros. And one of the interesting questions is like, well, where is all of that potential supply? Where did it go, right? There's a normal level of churn within the resale market, and it's just not there right now. And I believe part of that is just because Canadians have gotten used to very short, shallow housing downturns. So we've sort of become accustomed to, like, you just don't sell, and 12 months later you'll be back at record highs, and then only the idiots sell during the downturn. And so consequently, if we instead look at rental market listings on, for example, the MLS, they've spiked, and it just looks like a hockey stick, it's like flat by flat, boom. And I think what's happening is people who would have sold, right, are instead renting because of the strength of the rental market, because they can get these crazy rental prices. If all of that starts to cool, I think it'll push some supply into the resale market. It'll loosen up the rental market. All of that's going to be a good thing. That's just on the housing side. But
I've seen so much of that. I just so many conversations in the last several months around, oh, well, if we don't get our price, we'll just rent it out.
We'll just rent it out. Right.
Yeah. So much of that, because everybody's kind of well aware that the rental market's still quite tight here and rents are pretty high. And so that's the conversation. It's like, hey, we'll wait for rates to come down and the market to pick back up, or we'll just rent it out and then try again in a year or 2 years from now.
There's another economic element, which is just to add on to Ben, which is sorry to repeat myself, but is the wage piece. I mean, it takes a while to flesh out, but the wage piece, the capital investment piece, if you just have a net decline in young people, those big box corporations that Mark Miller is very fond of, will be forced to improve their productivity in different ways, through investment, through computing, so whatever, in different ways, in order to make up that shortfall, because there'll be higher wages demanded by a tighter labor market. That's just another way. Sorry, Ben, you were going to jump in there.
No, I think that's bang on. And I think just prior to that, though, I do think, all else equal, it will just be a softening in the broader economy, because the reality is when people come here, even if they're not permanent residents, they still need a place to live. They still got to buy goods and services. So I think between now and when you actually start getting the feed through from higher wages, I think we're gonna have a real soft spot in the Canadian economy. Like, it just kind of feeds back into my view overall that if you have the view that population growth is going to go from 3.2 down to 0.6, and we're not going to get some miracle productivity gain between now and then, this is a recession.
Are you worried about the number of units, rental units under construction today? Like, I know, I feel like the academics are like, supply, CMHC, we got to build 5 million homes. I think that's complete bogus personally. But are you worried in the near term about rental market starting to soften a little bit, listings piling up? You still got a lot of rental units under construction through the pipeline, which are pretty much being entirely facilitated through CMHC and their rental financing program. Because what I'm seeing and hearing a lot with developers and people in the space is that projects that were planning to go pre-sale and sell to the market are converting and going to rental due to the economic situation. The ability to actually pre-sell these units is obviously becoming increasingly challenging. We're just seeing more and more of these projects being converted to rental. And I'm just curious if that's on your radar.
Yeah, it is. The other thing is, everyone keeps quoting the CMHC figure that we need 5 million new homes to restore affordability. Their measure of affordability basically puts house prices like 50% below where they are now.
Yeah, it's nuts.
So yeah, if you're going to build 5 million, if you want house price to be cut in half, you need 5 million new homes, right? So everyone needs to be clear on that. That's what they were saying.
Nobody wants house prices to be cut in half. I can guarantee.
Right.
Ben,
that 5 million, throw that out the window. That's not what they were saying. So
pretty sure the banks go under. The banks go under in that scenario.
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of what's under construction, there's about 140,000 purpose-built rental units across the country, which is by far a record high. And then on top of that, you get about another 180,000 condos, and roughly half of those go into the long-term rental pool at completion based on CMHC data. So you kind of back into the numbers, we're looking at 225, 230,000 kind of de facto rental units under construction. It's a lot. That's a lot, especially if we're going to be in an environment where the non-permanent resident pool is actually going to be shrinking significantly. It's going to lead to a real loosening.
It's a lot, but sorry to interrupt you, but it's a lot. But vacancy rates are at all-time lows according to the central bank and other data pools across the country. So doesn't that just I'm looking at Q3, Q4 data, the vacancy rates are 3.9 for Canada. Doesn't it just pop the vacancy rate back to some kind of normal 5 or 6%? Or
that's exactly what I think it's going to do. So again, I'm not calling for like a big steep drop in rents. My view has been that we'll see normalization in rents where over the next year and a half, let's say, you'll see rental growth start to slow. And it'll probably end up in that kind of 2 to 3% range. It'll take a lot of the headline steam out of CPI. Now, to Rich's point, what's really interesting is you are starting to see pockets of real weakness in the rental market. So for example, if you look at condos being rented in Toronto, they're already falling on a year-over-year basis. Rents are, because of this dynamic of this huge surge in rental listings. And so every month, what I do is I pull like a random sample of 50 condo leases that had condos that had previously leased within the last 2 years. And we're now regularly seeing that a third to a half of them are renting for less than the prior lease price. So there's real softness there. And I don't know if that's like a leading indicator, if there's something kind of idiosyncratic there, but I actually have a view that the rental market is already starting to soften, and it's just not being reflected yet in the data. Steve, what are you seeing in Vancouver?
It's still pretty tight from what I can see. The problem is with Vancouver is we don't have like the MLS system doesn't really track the rents that well. Like we just brought it on. The real estate board in Vancouver just brought it on a couple of years ago. So there's really not a lot that gets listed on there. So it's kind of a bit of a black market. But I think, my conversations with property managers that, rents are holding up, but I think that the rate of growth is slowed dramatically.
I think that's right. I think that's starting, and it's just not being reflected in the data yet. That's what I'm hearing from property managers too.
Let's do the new tradition we're starting here on the Loonie Hour. So Ben, you're getting this first, and Steve and Rich have no idea what I'm going to come up with. But it's either going to be awesome or a boomer thing. Let's do a live poll. four of us, which will be done by a raise of hands, of course. And the question, and you can't look around, up and around, and see what everyone's
I
going to
can't
vote
do
for.
a sleepy Joe Biden.
Yeah, absolutely. But the answer is either going to be, yes, it will happen, or no, it won't happen. So the question is, will Canada have a recession in the next 12 months? So 1, 2, 3.
Are we saying hand up is yes?
See, he's
Yeah.
being the Joe Biden, right?
Yeah.
That's what he just said. Okay, so everyone who's listening, all four of us raised our hands and said, yeah, Canada will have a recession within the next 12 months or ish, something like that. So the next question, which is probably more important, is going to be, will the Bank of Canada be proactive with cutting rates or reactive with cutting rates? And my answer, I'll just answer this verbally. I think they're going to be reactive. I don't think they have that proactive culture for doing it. But I think, Ben, you have Ben, you have a different view on it.
So I think they'll be reactive as well. And Steve,
I'm a reactive guy.
All right, the lone one. I'll take that. So so how do we then square that? So I think one of the ways that we could frame that as a Twinkie bet. Did somebody just give me a thumbs? Who gave me a thumbs down? I just saw my screen.
I didn't know you could do that. Wait a second. I didn't know you could give
Steve?
people. This is amazing. Okay.
Can you do it? Flip the bird? Is that work on it? Where is
This
that
whole time for 4 years we've been able to give people a thumbs down. Anyway, sorry, Ben, please.
No, I was just listen. To believe that they're going to be completely reactive means they have to depart from every other prior rate cut cycle. And so, for example, I was just looking at this data this week. So if you look at mortgage arrears, right, and you plot a chart of mortgage arrears over time in Canada, and then you overlay the first rate cut of every cutting cycle on that, they literally cut at the lows, or like within a few bips of the lows, and then mortgage arrears rise for typically the next 18 to 24 months. And that's just one example. I believe that they will be proactive. They're going to start cutting ahead of the shit really hitting the fan. But I can see Rich wants to push back on that. Go for it.
So again, I love analysis. I would say the most famous words in any strategist's repertoire is "this time is different," and I think the population growth screws with their math. Well, what say you to that?
Yeah. Well, again, but they've been very clear that they don't have to get right back to target. They just need to see that the trend is moving that direction and that they can then have the cover. And I think the same is true around population growth. If they're doing the same math that I am, and of course they are, they're way smarter than I'm ever going to be. They're seeing the same thing I am, which is that this population boom is done if the feds follow through. And so that gives them some cover, I think. And the other thing you got to keep in mind, guys, is like on the inflation side, if rents are going to start slowing, which I think that's, we could debate that, but what's definitely going to start falling out is the mortgage interest component. That's 0.8% of the headline print. And so if that starts dropping out, there's a lot of room there to absorb some of the higher input costs from, for example, rising commodity, gasoline prices, et cetera. So there's a lot I think they can absolutely be proactive on this.
Yeah,
So
that's
Ben,
a fair point about mortgage. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, there's a lot of pushback on Twitter, of course, which is always fun to engage in. But the argument that you hear a lot is, well, look at the States, inflation's being stickier, economy's a lot stronger, the Fed is not going to cut maybe to the extent that everybody sort of thinks they're going to. And so the Bank of Canada is not going to be able to cut rates because the Fed is not going to move that much. And, if we do, the currency is going to get trashed here in Canada. We're going to start importing inflation and everything's going to go to hell in a handbasket. And I'm kind of curious your view on that and how you kind of overlay that in terms of your predictions for the BOC.
No, I think that's exactly right. And that is that's one thing I'm really wrestling with. And I've been kind of sounding that alarm for years now, because you're right. We can see household balance sheets are in great shape. They've termed out their debt. Same is true for businesses. You only got a quarter of business debt that's floating rate. They're much more immune to this rate hike cycle than we are. It absolutely will act as a limiter in terms of how low the Bank of Canada can go, but that's a discussion for 2025. I think they're going to have an oh crap moment when the data starts rolling as hard as I believe it's going to. And I could be wrong on this, and Rich could be right. It's just going to take longer. Totally plausible. I'm happy to concede that. But I just think that they're going to be proactive at first, and then they're going to the discussion will turn in 25 to how low they can go without the Fed starting to move.
So I think to sort of sum it all up here, I think both Ben and Rich will be right. But what I mean by that is I don't think they're going to be proactive, Bank of Canada, but it might appear that they're being proactive. It's just that they'll have better visibility into data. So for example, their conversations with commercial banks on a daily basis, they're going to determine very quickly. They're going to have that, oh my crap, holy crap moment, whatever it's going to be. And then both of you guys can say, hey, we're both right. And you can move along that way. But I think, though, the more alarming part of this conversation is it's not whether we have a recession or not, because the way cycles work, by default, the next movement in the cycle is downward. That has to happen by default. But is how deep or how aggressive the recession is. Because if it is something that's a bit gradual, you work through it. There's going to be winners and losers in that kind of a cycle. But the concern here is what you referenced, Ben. I know we've referenced it a few times as well, is that we do get a hard landing, and no one is ready for a hard landing. And that, that'll be pretty hard.
Yeah, I guess it depends on your definition. I'm more in the camp that probably what we're going to see is just a long grinding kind of balance sheet recession that just weighs on consumer spending, weighs on economic growth for years. It's hard to get to a scenario, especially with the magnitude of spending, like fiscal. What are you showing me there? Is that the time?
Yeah, we're gonna keep going.
Oh, are you saying we're okay? All right, we got to wrap it up.
I'm telling Steve we're getting close to wrap up time.
Thanks,
here.
buddy.
No,
I don't know how to
the
do my
conversation
job over here.
Yeah.
No,
Way to
that's
ruin
good.
the
That's
flow
good.
of the episode.
I'm in the long grind as opposed to super hard landing. But listen, we can't get off without having some sort of a Twinkie bet. So can I throw something out? So right now markets are pricing in 75 basis points of cuts for out to 2020, the end of the year. Where do you guys land on that? Over or under? Under being less than 75 bips, over being more.
Oh man, that's a good one.
I say less.
So I'm taking the over.
Yeah, I'll say less.
So there you go. Okay, so Rich and I have a Twinkie bet.
Yeah,
where do you guys
enough.
land on that?
But I think you've done such a great job articulating sort of what I was waiting to have to change my mind. When the data changes, what do you do? And that's the major data point. And I've been saying all along, if population growth is this high, they can't cut. Well, guess what? We're about to enter a scenario where that number is going to change. And so you've done a really good job convincing me. Actually, I think when I started the pod, I think I was thinking one way, and I moved a lot closer, frankly, to your point of view, which is a credit to you and all the work that you do. But I just for the sake of the television, I'll definitely take the hard under. I think 25 basis points probably, but
oh wow. Okay. That's
Rich.
That's
if you lose the bet, Ben replaces you on the Loonie Hour.
Oh, that's what else am I gonna do on Thursdays other than work? Of course, I love my job, but
I love your shirt, by the way, Rich. That is amazing.
We sell them on our Loonie Hour website.
Yeah,
oh, really?
Thanks for setting them
merch.
That's
that's awesome. You guys didn't even set me up for that. That was fantastic.
No. Ben, we want to be respectful of your time. We want to thank you again. Of course, Keith is pushing everybody off the show now. So thanks again for coming on. Hopefully let's see how these predictions shape up. Maybe we'll get you on for a third appearance later this year once the BOC cuts.
Well, it should be early. We should do early 25 because somebody's got to eat a Twinkie. And that bet will have to settle at the end of the year.
No, we can't wait that long. I think we will both. The answer will make itself apparent before the fall, before the next hockey season. I think.
Okay, cool.
We'll find a way.
All right, happy to do it, guys.
Sounds
good.
Thanks again,
time,
Ben.
Ben. Good to see you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
It was a great interview there with Ben. Should be an interesting Twinkie bet. Rich.
Yeah, my role on the Loonie Hour is at stake apparently, which I did not agree to beforehand. But I mean, Ben did just such a good job. I think he articulated sort of what I needed to see change. I think he laid it out in a way that I don't have much pushback, to be honest with you. I guess my like meager counter argument, which is I guess not that strong, is sort of the time it takes to see those numbers. But yeah, I don't know, Keith, what did you have to add, if anything?
I mean, we're going to make a lot of money when this happens. I know that. So you know, being the cold, insensitive money manager as we have to be, you know, this is our expectation of where we're headed. And as I think we're splitting hairs, you know, whether they cut by 75 by this time or that
Fair.
time. The real concern Canadians should have is that if the Bank of Canada is cutting by 75, then you know, again, it's our view. You're going to have a lot more to worry about than, you know, your variable rate mortgage, because there would be a ton of job losses coming up. The banks would be cutting left, right, and center. And then the worst case scenario, imagine if they had to cut by more than 75.
Yeah.
Or imagine if instead of doing 25 basis point cuts, Steve, imagine they're doing a 25, a 25, a 50, and another 50. And that's a situation, you know, it's kind of pandemic, like, you know, the whole world is like doing funky stuff. I don't know where we go.
Can't rule it out.
But
Rich,
you gotta get, but the first step is, you know, the first cut, you know, and the first cut is the deepest.
Come on. Oh my God. You're so
Rich, your girl Carolyn Rogers was out this week with an important press conference that
she's
creating a lot of buzz.
It's clearly the people at the BOC listen to the Loonie Hour, because I've been going on and on about productivity growth for a long, long time. I don't know if we have enough time to get into it this week because we're running out of time, but I think it's just you know, it's something maybe we'll discuss next week. But it's just, she basically I would recommend actually here. So here's some homework for the Loonie Hour. Loonie Hour listeners, to go and go on YouTube or go on the Bank of Canada website and watch her speech. And the speech that Caroline Rogers gave in Keith's hometown, or not hometown, but Keith's town right now in Halifax, is called "Time to Break the Glass: Fixing Canada's Productivity Problem." And sort of, she articulates sort of what determines productivity, why it's important sort of to, and you know, in the fight against inflation. And then she goes into sort of her biggest concerns, which is competition, which is something I've talked about a lot. And so, yeah, we don't have too much time today to go over it, but that's the Loonie Hour listener homework. And
in a non-creepy way, everyone, Rich has watched this interview or speech about 25 times now.
I've read it a few times. I think it really nails down the issues. And thankfully she also articulates some of the potential solutions. And I think that that's really where we should be focused on next. It's not enough to just say this is shit or this is bad or whatever. Everybody, I think coast to coast has probably some really good ideas on how this can be improved. I think she articulates a couple of them. I think competition is really one and she talks about energy and sort of supporting the high productive, high value industries in this country. And I hope that the government of Canada is listening to Caroline Rogers.
If you read it or listen to it closely, though, she was firing daggers at the government, and it was extremely aggressive for central bank to do that. However, it was needed. So, you know, congratulations and thank you to the monetary guys for doing this. But we'll go more next week on it, right, Steve?
We also had the the Renters' Bill of Rights that was announced by the federal government. Just quickly on that, the new measures include a $15 million tenant protection fund and creating price discovery on rentals. So the government wants landlords to start marking down what they've charged in rent for the last number of years, which is very odd. I don't think anybody wanted that or needed that. And then they've also creating a nationwide standard lease agreement to give renters more agency. Again, for anyone that's paying attention to this is just complete bogus. Tenancy contracts and laws are set at the provincial level, and there's already provincial tenancy agreements from every provincial government readily available. So like there was not one, I can't think of one person in this country that was like, hey, you know what we need? A nationwide tenancy agreement. But again, I
also,
know
isn't the law provincial? Like Quebec, it's common law. Sorry, Quebec, it's civil law, and Ontario is common law, and certain those agreements would have to be applicable to the jurisdiction and the legal codes respective of the province, right?
Every province has their own tenancy laws and regulations, right?
Okay.
Like Alberta, no rent control. BC, strict rent control. Like this is the nationwide tenancy agreement would make literally zero sense. So again, I'm not really sure who they've been consulting with. The other thing quickly,
GC strategies for consulting.
they're building the app. Rent can. It's coming. But yeah, and then the last one was they're gonna start doing, and people were all like excited about this. Renters getting credit, so they're gonna get like they can if they pay your rent on time, it would go towards your credit score, so you can build a credit score, and then maybe
That seemed like a good idea to me. That seemed like a good idea.
But like the dynamics of it, like first of all, prop tech companies are already like in the process of solving that.
Oh, right.
So it's already happening. Number two is you need individual landlords which are the bulk of landlords, are individual mom and pop people to report to the credit bureau. Do we actually think that's going to happen at scale where mom and pop landlords are going to be reporting?
No, that's annoying. It's just
No.
another form of regulation. Which
Exactly.
Carolyn Rogers mentions is one of the reasons Canada's not competitive and has shitty productivity. Anyway, sorry.
And
Exactly.
rents
So-
would actually increase to pay for this extra cost because you have to outsource it potentially.
Yeah,
and
but this is
everything.
things that I don't know, people just don't really think about. So anyways, again, we're solving, these are solutions in search of problems, but that was it on the tenancy bill. So if you saw the news headline and the interviews, that's kind of the quick summary on the impacts it will have to tenants is basically nil. But I digress. As always, guys, appreciate the support with the Loonie Hour, and we'll see you next week.